Hey, this is Zulem Urbina, and tune into the relay for the latest news in boxing all around the world. Thank you for supporting myself and other female boxers. We truly appreciate it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this interesting development in the men's lightweight division. Shakur Stevenson versus Frank Martin for the vacant WBC title has been ordered. I'm sure you're all aware this would be another top rank versus PBC kind of deal, kind of matchup. It's a good fight.
It is.
Jay Prince and Al Heyman are pressed with the rare situation to potentially do business together. A vacant lightweight title fight between Shakur Stevenson and Frank Martin has been ordered by the WBC. BoxingScene.com has learned. The two sides have until September 5th to reach terms and avoid a purse bid hearing. Stevenson is co-promoted by Top Rank and Antonio Leonard Promotions and managed by Jay Prince and Josh Dubin. Martin is promoted by Errol Spence's Man Down Promotions and primarily fights on Heyman's PBC brand shows.
We're a little over a week out from the 5th. That's next week, Tuesday.
And if you're Frank Martin, you've got to think long and hard on this one, because if you pass up this world title shot, this opportunity, what are you going to replace it with? Isaac Cruz is rumored to be facing Gervonta Davis again.
On the PBC side,
Where Frank Martin primarily fights, Isaac Cruz is rumored to be facing Gervonta Davis for a second time in the fall or winter months. If he does, those are two guys that are not available to you, available to Frank.
two of the only decent-sized fights that Frank could have on his own side of things.
The ordered title fight with Shakur Stevenson comes as rumors have swirled of a potential showdown between the unbeaten lightweight contenders. Stevenson, 20-0 with 10 KOs, moved up to lightweight earlier this year. He was forced to do so after he missed weight and left his WBC and WBO junior lightweight titles on the scales ahead of a 12-round fight with Robson Conceição last September in his hometown of Newark, New Jersey. The 2016 Olympic silver medalist and former two-division champion returned home for his latest win, a 6th-round knockout of unbeaten Shuichiro Yoshino on April 8th to become the mandatory challenger for the WBC title.
Shakur's a high-risk, low-reward guy. That's what he is.
That's how they look at him. That's why when Isaac Cruz, yet another PBC fighter, another PBC guy, when he was ordered to fight Shakur, he chose to forego the fight, go another route.
Frank Martin decided to do that.
Shakur Stevenson was campaigning to challenge undisputed lightweight champion Devin Haney, who last defended in a May 20th unanimous decision win over Vasyl Lomachenko at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas. Haney and Stevenson exchanged words in the ring after the fight, but talks never got off the ground even after the WBC intervened to get a status update from its champion. Haney opted to instead enter talks for a targeted challenge of WBC super lightweight champion Regis Prograrius later this year. The move came at the expense of this being named WBO champion in recess, which cleared the path for Stevenson to next challenge for the title.
I think he meant WBC.
He meant WBC. The WBC title, in so many words, has been vacated. And now Devin's going to go up there to 140.
He's going to fight Regis and Shakur. Shakur's going to fight for Devin's old belt.
The search to find Shakur Stevenson an opponent led them to Frank Martin, a 28-year-old Detroit native who lives in Indianapolis and trains with Spence in the greater Dallas area.
He's got a bit of a buzz. He's an unbeaten guy.
Martin advanced in the World Boxing Council's rankings after a 12-round unanimous decision win over then unbeaten Artem Haratunian on July 15th in Las Vegas. A 12th round knockout was enough to preserve a close win for the rising contender after a more decisive 2022 campaign that saw wins over Romero Duno and Jackson Marinez, Michel Rivera.
Frank doesn't have a bad resume, and I don't think Frank Martin is a bad fighter. I don't.
Romero Duno, Jackson Marinez, Michel Rivera, Artem Haratunian. These are actually some solid fighters and some solid names for Frank Martin, though I'd be lying to you if I told you that I think Frank has the same ceiling as young Shakur.
No, he's good, but he ain't that good.
Not completely sure this fight happens, though I hope it does, because I do think it's a solid fight between unbeaten fighters. See, if you're Frank Martin, fighting Shakur Stevenson likely requires you to go over to the top-ranked side of things, as they are heavily invested in young Shakur. Frank.
I don't think the PBC and Showtime are about to break the bank just for Frank to stay on their side of things if the purse bid rolls around.
Trying to bring Shakur over to their side of things could be very expensive for them, whereas Frank doesn't make all that much to begin with. So it seems more feasible to me for Top Rank to get him to cross over to their side.
Yeah.
That's if he wants this fight.
Shakur Stevenson is making in the neighborhood of $3 million per fight. About $3 million per fight. Frank's not making that kind of dough.
So Frank crossing over to Top Rank and ESPN seems more cost feasible, more realistic. And let's be honest, Frank, even though he's an unbeaten up-and-comer, he's 28 years old. He's not the youngest guy.
He's what, 2-3 years older than Shakur?
Shakur Stevenson, who's 26 years old, and he's already been a champion at 2 weights. He's already a 2-division champion, whereas
Frank is older than Shakur Stevenson, older than Devin Haney, older than Teofimo Lopez, but far less accomplished. That when you think about the young guys, the young fighters at or around these weights, Frank is older than they are.
Less accomplished. This feels like a now or never kind of moment for Frank Martin, because if he were to forego this fight, what would he replace it with? You're not getting Gervonta Davis.
No.
You're not getting Isaac Cruz.
No.
Rolly Romero left the division. He's up there at 140.
A fight with Chris Colbert, a fight with De Los Santos, those ain't money fights. Those fights won't get you a belt.
That if he were to skip out on fighting Shakur, what's the alternative?
See a plan B.
If the Frank Martin people don't want to fight Shakur, they don't want to have to cross the street, they don't want to do that, what's the alternative?
PBC's not about to break the bank to get that fight. I don't think they are.
Showtime and the PBC are not spending on Frank Martin fights what Top Rank and ESPN are spending on Shakur Stevenson fights. So let's get that straight.
I feel like if the fight's gonna happen, if it does end up going down, it goes down on the Top Rank side of things.
Perhaps Team Martin don't like that idea, but I'm just left wondering, what's the alternative to fighting for a title?
If you forego this fight, what have you got in mind?
So you know, he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You forego this thing, it's hard to say what you can substitute it with.
This guy's close to 30. It's now or never.
We'll see what happens. We'll keep you posted. Just in keeping with the theme of men's lightweight action, the Gervonta Davis versus Isaac Cruz rematch is reportedly being lined up to potentially happen next. Hence why Cruz was unavailable for the vacant WBC lightweight world title fight, and the WBC ordered Shakur Stevenson versus Frank Martin instead.
It's not exactly true, you know.
Not exactly. The World Boxing Council first ordered Stevenson versus Isaac Cruz late last year in November. Plenty of time for Isaac Cruz to have the fight with Shakur Stevenson if he actually liked his chances. And that was the determining factor. When push came to shove, Isaac doesn't like his chances.
Isaac Cruz has fought at least once since that order in November came down late last year. He just shared the ring with Giovanni Cabrera, an unheralded opponent, a safe choice.
Safer, at least, than a Shakur Stevenson fight. That was just a few weeks ago on the undercard of Spence versus Crawford. And he likely would have made more money boxing Shakur Stevenson than boxing Giovanni Cabrera on an undercard. With Stevenson, that would have been a headline fight. He would have been the headliner.
Him and Shakur.
Too many times I see the fighters and their teams confuse the fight fans with this either-or attitude. These either-or situations when it's not either-or. If you really liked your chances against Shakur, you would have fought him, took care of business, and you still would have had plenty of time to have a rematch with Gervonta.
Yeah.
Isaac Cruz has fought about 3 times since dropping that decision to Gervonta Davis in late 2021, well over a year ago. And not a single fight that he's had since then was a meaningful fight, an important fight.
Gamboa, Ramirez, Cabrera.
None of those fights would have got the same attention as a Shakur Stevenson fight. A Shakur Stevenson fight which was ordered late last year. And that's basically saying that for over a year,
Close to 2.
Isaac's been on easy street, biding his time, waiting and playing it safe, hoping to get a Gervonta Davis rematch.
That's it.
Nobody's asking for one. Nobody is asking to see this. While a second Gervonta Davis fight might do slightly better business than the first fight did, because in the first fight, Isaac was a little more than a late replacement, and nobody knew him, nobody knew of him. They know a little bit more about him now.
And it might do a little bit better business now.
Better than the first fight, but nowhere in the neighborhood of what Gervonta just did with Ryan Garcia. I mean, this fight ain't coming close to selling $1 million or even $500,000. Quite honestly, I'd be surprised if it sells $300,000.
I'd be surprised.
Because no one is asking for this. Given Gervonta Davis's age and how long he's been around, where he campaigns, it's about time he fight a Shakur Stevenson or a Devin Haney or a Teofimo Lopez. He's often regaled as the cash cow at these weights, but doesn't that mean he can make any fight that he wants, any fight with, and he won? So why is he making this one?
Why is he fighting Usyk again? You beat him already.
You'll see a sharp decline in the buy rate from one fight to the other, from the Ryan Garcia fight to the Usyk Cruz fight. Let's not pretend that Usyk Cruz is anything other than a guy Gervonta Davis beat. In the subsequent weeks and months that followed their initial meeting, they've been trying to build Usyk into some kind of star, but because he hasn't fought anyone,
Hasn't beat anyone.
the subsequent weeks and months that have followed his initial meeting with Gervonta Davis, what has he actually done? Who has he actually fought?
No one.
And what's the selling point for a second fight? Why should the consumer pay their hard-earned cash to see a rerun?
They had over a year to turn this guy into something. They had over a year to put him in a meaningful fight.
Check, sense this either-or mentality I'm talking about. It wasn't an either-or situation in facing Shakur Stevenson or Gervonta Davis. Given the amount of time that has passed, you had enough time to fight them both. The reason you didn't is because you don't like your chances against Shakur. And if you lose to Shakur,
There goes the Davis fight.
you don't want the bubble to burst. If Usyk Cruz goes in there and gets handled by some other fighter that's with some other outfit, suddenly Gervonta beating him doesn't mean anything, and the pressure will be on for Gervonta to fight them instead.
Don't lose sight of the fact that Usyk Cruz has no elite wins at lightweight, and neither does Gervonta Davis.
What they tell you is Usyk must be good because he was able to go the distance with Gervonta, but who did Gervonta beat at lightweight?
No one.
I mean, what, are we supposed to act like fighting Hector Garcia at lightweight is the same as fighting Shakur, is the same as fighting Devin?
It's not.
Fighting Usyk ain't no better because he didn't beat anyone.
Told you this was coming.
And here we are. I feel like after that Gervonta Davis fight, given the account of himself that he gave, Usyk had the potential to be built into something, but the matchmaking...
You know, because he's a pressure fighter, he's a Mexican slugger.
He does have a fan-friendly style, and if he plays his cards right, he can get those Chicano fans, those Mexican fans that really move the needle, he can aspire to get them behind him. The issue is he doesn't have the ceiling.
Not actually that good.
He didn't look good with Cabrera in his last fight.
Nope.
But commercially, seems like a guy who could be built into something, at least in theory, though as far as ability, that's why you can't match him better. That's why you can't match him tough, because he's not actually that good.
So all that potential to turn him into a draw is unrealized potential.
Men's heavyweight news. Daniel Dubois admits, I became disheartened, lost momentum after that fifth round.
That only further accents what people are thinking.
Daniel Dubois explains that he became confused when he saw Usyk go down and no count was issued from the referee. From then on, when he went down, I thought, okay, now the 10 count. I knew he wasn't going to get up in time. He was holding his stomach. He couldn't move, Dubois told BBC Sport. But something in me just felt, oh no, what's going on here? This isn't right. Why isn't he being counted? I'm looking ringside at what's going on. I see all the craziness. I was thinking, what's going on here? This is a blatant shot. I told the referee I caught him, and it wasn't low. It was just confusion at the time. I became disheartened and lost momentum after that.
Doesn't have the minerals.
So basically telling the world is in a fight where you lost almost every single round, your shining moment throughout the entirety of the match was a borderline shot, a foul.
That's it.
I was up against it, on enemy territory, but I wasn't out of my league. If that was in England, that would be totally different. Circumstances make a big difference. Home turf, home advantage.
You got that right, because if you didn't have home field advantage in the Kevin Lorena fight, that fight would have got waved off.
It would have got waved off, and you would have never got the chance to fight Alexander Usyk.
While we're on the subject of home field advantage.
Your shining moment in this entire fight was a borderline shot, what was classified as a foul. Classified as a foul immediately. What were you doing the rest of the round? What were you doing the rest of the fight? Because it's not like you were winning it before that. You weren't.
And I had it 4 rounds to 0 after 4 in favor of Usyk.
Usyk, who said, if the referee started to count, I would have definitely jumped up.
I'm devastated. Devastation is an understatement. The fighter, Daniel Dubois, was robbed of his moment. The team, the family, friends, the country, robbed last night, said Don Charles to IFL TV.
We knew we had to end the fight in 6 rounds, which we managed to do in the 5th round. That was a knockout. That wasn't even a TKO. It was a KO. There is only one God. Usyk is always seen making cross signs and praying. I want to know which God he is worshipping, because you don't lie in the name of God.
The Oscar goes to...
Dial it down a bit, Peter O'Toole. Alexander Usyk can't decide on his own whether it's a low blow or not. That's up to the ref. and the ref made that decision in a split second.
Made the call. Deal with it.
For me, 100%. If the referee started to count, I would have definitely got up, Usyk told Boxing King Media. I would be on my feet. It would be hard for me to recuperate and come back to my normal state, but there is no doubt that I would be up. It's not a good thing when people try to get the victory using dirty tactics. You cannot win by being dirty. You have to be clear.
Usyk thinks they were being dirty.
Ahead of the fight, you heard what Daniel Dubois had to say. That he was going to be rough and rugged with Alexander Usyk, that he was going to rough him up. And if you go back and you watch that fight, that punch, that uppercut in the 5th round, isn't the only shot that sailed low.
It wasn't.
And being rough and rugged and being rough and tumble with Alexander Usyk, was it their intention, at least clandestinely, to foul him?
It's not the only punch that sailed low.
I'll tell you now, that if Daniel Dubois' shining moment in that 9-round fight, a fight that lasted 9 rounds, if his only shining moment was that borderline shot,
He ain't got it.
saying that he became disheartened in the 5th and lost momentum thereafter,
He ain't got it.
even if it were exactly the way that Daniel says it is, that only further accents that he's got a ticker problem. He ain't got it. That when he's in a pinch and he's in a tight spot, he doesn't have the minerals, the intestinal fortitude to deal with a situation. He will mentally check out.
He ain't got it.
It's the way that Daniel says it is. Now, according to Froch, Farrell believes Daniel Dubois is still young enough to rebuild and become a future force, perhaps domestically.
He said that?
He says that Daniel is still young enough to rebuild and become a force. I'm saying if he's a force anywhere, it would have to be on the local scene, the domestic one. Small hall shows like the Copper Box, at York Hall, the AO Arena.
He ain't got it for world level.
I think he could be the future of the sport. In heavyweight boxing, there's not many around. Even Joe Joyce, who has already beaten him, is in his late 30s, Froch told Talk Sport. I don't think a rematch with Joe Joyce would be a wise move for him. I'd like to see him in a couple of steady fights, build his confidence back, and he can come again, I think. I really do.
What I think is that Daniel Dubois, you could probably put him in there with a couple of Sam Sexton kind of guys, maybe build him up to a Huey Fury.
Domestically, that's a fight that could get some attention, a Dubois versus Huey Fury fight. But as far as world level, I don't think Daniel has the minerals for that. He can't handle the pressure. When push comes to shove and he's in a pinch, he's going to check out.
This whole bit about the controversy in the 5th round and all of that is distracting people from Daniel Dubois quitting on the biggest stage he's ever fought on.
I thought it was a low blow. I just say things as I see them, and the glove landed half on the waistband, half on the shorts, just above the crown jewels area, Froch said. If you kept throwing punches like that all night, you would be pulled up every time. It was a borderline, but unfortunate for Dubois. In professional boxing, the waistband is an illegal area unless the referee specifies, and my interpretation of a low blow is anything below the navel.
Frank Warren and Daniel Dubois are going to milk that controversy for all that it's worth, but it's not going to change who Daniel really is on the inside.
You can build him back up, put him in there with a couple of ham and egg guys, put him in there in a couple of easy ones to get him back in the winner's bracket, rebuild his confidence, and regain some momentum.
You can.
But as soon as you step him up, that's as soon as it'll take him to quit again. He'll quit again. You match him too tough, he'll give up. He'll give in. You can make it about the 5th round as much as you like while you still can.
Yeah.
It's never really in that fight, and you're focusing on a borderline shot to distract people from that.